house as a counselor. I also coached the softball team, and we were like the Bad News Bears. Every year we were like the loser team. We would play against other churches in Staten Island. And one year we won the championship, and my son happened to be there that day, and it was a love fest. It was such a great moment for not just the guys that were on the team were in drug treatment, so they already felt like losers anyway. So it was one day where everyone had a big smile. Even the other team that lost was like, okay, that was. So that was a great moment.
Anyone else want to share? Daniel, is everything?
I just had a really great bonding and getting to know all the students.
Yeah.
My first student teaching person. So whenever I have time to just go and
What about Christine?
I think the one where I remember really happy was my cousin's college.
Ah.
It was like a big leaf off my shoulders. I think that's like the only time I've ever cried
And when that happened, did you celebrate with other people?
No, but I was actually home alone.
Oh, no. But did you call someone and tell them?
Well, I was waiting for my parents to come
Okay,
home.
so told your parents? Did you tell your parents?
Well, yeah, right when we came home, I like ran downstairs, which as bad as it sounds, I usually never do whenever they come home. But I ran down, like picked up a letter and showed it to them. And they're really happy.
Oh. Janice?
I don't know if there's any particular moment, but like when I there's a big thing that I am doing and it's completed, that's like very satisfying, like an exhibition or something.
Yeah. I asked that question because when I think about the most joyful moments in my life, what I notice is rarely am I alone in those most joyful moments. Usually the reason why those moments are so joyful is not because something that's happened or something that I'm doing, but it's really joyful because of the people that I'm experiencing this moment with. And so when I think about joyful moments, I think about time that my wife and I took our first vacation to Hawaii together with her family. And I say with her family because I don't want you to think that me and my wife went on vacation, just because this is the time when we were single, when we were dating each other. So we went with our family together. We were not, in the same, we didn't just rent out like a hotel just for ourselves. My wife was like, telling me, if you tell a story, make sure you mention you went with our family. So, I think about Hawaii, Maui. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Maui before. Oh man, so it was beautiful. Everything was perfect. The weather works perfect. The scenery was perfect. The water is like so blue and like clear and so clean. And so, we were in love. And so we were both kind of walking on clouds, And so I think that was definitely one of the most joyful moments of my life. Another moment I think is obviously our wedding day. And what made that so special was we were able to celebrate with my friends and family, as we ate delicious cake, eating a lot of good food, but being able to celebrate and dance to Montel Jordan's hit song, "This Is How We Do It" from the 90s. I don't know if you remember that song, but I remember that was like the happy moment in the wedding, I thought, because that was when my drunk uncle really started getting crazy on the dance floor. Another precious moment was just the day that my wife and I carried Alyssa for the first time when she was born. And again, what made that moment so special was not just that Alyssa was there, but that we were able to share that moment, with our family and friends. And so, sometimes the most joyful moment I think is just having coffee or dinner with someone that you enjoy being around. Someone that you can just joke and laugh around, and maybe just have deep, meaningful conversations together. Sometimes those are the most joyful moments. And I think the point I want to make is that I think it's rare that the great moments of joy are experienced in isolation from one another. joy experienced outside, I think, of relationship to God and outside of relationship to others is often, I think, an inadequate or an incomplete joy. And today, in this passage, Jesus talks about what it means to experience joy that is complete. And he says that we can experience this joy that's complete by obeying this one simple command, which is to love one another as I have loved you. Now, in order for us to obey this command, Jesus tells us we must first remain in his love. Now, what does that mean? So, when Jesus talks about remaining in his love, he's talking about this in the context of the branch and the vines. Earlier in this chapter, Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches. And basically what he says is that as long as you remain in me, as long as you are intimately connected to me, you will do what branches are made for. You will produce fruit. And so in today's text, Jesus identifies that fruit to be joy. So joy is one of the fruits of the Spirit that Paul talks about in Galatians 5:22. He says the fruits of the Spirit is love, it's joy, it's peace, it's gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness. And so joy is number 2 on his list of the fruits of the Spirit. And so in other words, joy is basically the fruit, or it's the byproduct of having an intimate connection with Jesus. And so this is the first component to experiencing joy that is complete, which is that we need to remain in Jesus' love. Now in verse 12, this passage, Jesus adds a second component that contributes to a joy that's complete. And that component is expressed when he tells us that we should love one another as he has loved us. And what's interesting about this commandment is this is actually a brand new commandment. To love one another as I have loved you. In John 13:34, Jesus, he makes this very clear. He said, this is a new command that I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And I don't know if you remember, there's a time when Jesus has a conversation with Pharisees. And the Pharisees ask him, what is the greatest commandment, right, in all the 10 commandments? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now today Jesus is saying the new commandment is love your neighbor as I have loved you. And so what's interesting about that is that for us, I think we have an advantage of loving people well compared to the people in the Old Testament. Because in the Old Testament, it says that love your neighbor as you love yourself. So the motivation to love other people is just it comes from the understanding that, I want to treat other people the way I want to be treated. But now for us, now we're like empowered. It's like our love is now empowered with Jesus' love. Because now our motivation to love other people is based on our experience of knowing Jesus' love for ourselves. And I think when you're able to experience Jesus' love for ourselves, that becomes a game changer in terms of how you relate to people. It's a huge motivation to love people in a way that is life-changing. Because for us, we know that Jesus gave his life for us, right? And knowing that he gave his life for us, that kind of motivates us now to do the same, to give our lives for one another. Now, the primary purpose of the church, the reason why we get together, is that church provides a community where we can actually exercise this command, to love one another as we've experienced Jesus' love. And by that, we're able to experience this joy that Jesus says is complete. And this is a place where this joy can actually thrive and where we can love one another well. And, if we're having trouble, I think, loving others, I think a lot of us do. Let's be honest, it's hard to love people. And I said it's hard to love people at work, it's hard to love people in school, but it's even more difficult, and like I said, in the church. Because in church, we have an expectation, right? We have an expectation for people to act godly, to be Jesus-like. And so it becomes very difficult, I think, for us to love people in the church. And if we're having difficulty loving others, it may be that we just haven't experienced Jesus' love for ourselves personally. That may be it. I'm the worst person to ask for directions in New York. Don't ever ask me for directions in New York. I have no idea where we're ever at. I'm always relying on Google Maps. And the reason why is because, I'm not a native New Yorker. I grew up in California. So, I've only been there for a couple of years. And in California, if you ask me where to go, if you want directions, I can probably help you out because I'm intimately connected to California. But I'm not yet intimately connected with New York. I don't feel fully at home here, and I don't have that intimate connection here. And in the church, I think for many of us, we can still be in God's house, and not be intimately connected with Jesus. And we may not feel completely at home here in God's house. And I think, in fact, even in the church, you need the key, okay.
Sorry.
So we can only do this in small, this is what's great about having a small worship service, we can do things like this.
Sorry.
I was thinking also, because the bathroom is like right there, I just go to the bathroom. So this is an awesome location, and the way that our service is running, I think it works out for us. But, to get back to my point, even in the church, we can be lost. I'm taking a preaching class at New Life Fellowship, and in that class there's a guy named DJ. He's a young guy, he helps out with the youth group. And he gave like a pretty good message about the parable of the woman and the lost coin. This woman, she loses her coin in her house. And he made a pretty profound statement, and it was this. It says that even while we're in God's house, we can be lost, like this coin, and not even know it. And I heard this, like, wow, everyone was like, that's pretty deep. Like, no one ever thought about that when we were thinking about that passage. I think for us, we can experience the same thing. We could be growing up in the church, like many of us did, in God's house. We've grown up in the church, in God's house, where we feel comfortable here, and yet I think it's possible for us to feel lost here and not even know it. I think about also as like the prodigal son. The prodigal son, he lived under his father's roof, since he was a child. He was taken care of, and, he did all the right things, I'm sure, that he was supposed to do as a son. But, he didn't have an intimate connection with his father, right? Because why? Because he saw his father as an insurance policy. That's how he saw him. He was just waiting to get his inheritance. When he looked at his dad, all he saw was dollar signs. He didn't look at his father as someone that he had a personal connection and a relationship with. And so I think we could say that before he left the house, he was actually lost a long time ago when he was in the house. And I guess my question to you guys today is, are you intimately connected to Jesus? What do you do to get intimately connected to him? How much time do you spend with him? Do you make it a priority? Or is he just an insurance policy to make sure that you get into heaven in case all of this actually is real that I'm talking about? Is he just a get out of hell free card? And let's be honest, I think for a lot of us that's how we see God. We see him as like a backup insurance policy. I don't know if the stuff that Pastor John is teaching is real or not, but just in case it's real, I'm going to stick it out because I want to make sure that at least I have this insurance policy to get into heaven. Now, for Jesus to say that he wants to make our joy complete, it implies that we may be settling for a joy that is incomplete, one that's maybe inadequate. And I think often this joy is incomplete when we don't experience authentic community. And so in this day and age, I think it's really difficult to experience authentic community in the church. And I think the reason is because we live in a culture that celebrates individualism and promotes loneliness, actually. I think it's like in the Netherlands. People, I think it's Netherlands, I could be wrong. But it's somewhere in that area. But basically, people are so lonely out there, it's such an epidemic. They actually have a minister of loneliness. This is their actual job. So they've actually voted someone to be the minister of loneliness, and her job is to make sure that people are not lonely. I think it just gives you an idea of like how isolated our world is, and I think what contributes to that is when we become so focused on just relying on ourselves to get by, right? I grew up, as you guys know, with a very strong-willed mom. I joke around that she would have been the lead teacher for this group called Cobra Kai, a karate group in the movie Karate Kid. In the movie Karate Kid, there's this dojo called Cobra Kai. It's a bunch of jerks, you know, like a bunch of like jocks who all do karate. And they have a motto, and it's basically strike first, strike hard, and no mercy, you know, no mercy. And so in my household, there wasn't a lot of room for weakness. There wasn't a lot of room for mercy. My mother told us, you know, just be independent and strong like your mother, and you can get back in life, you know. We don't have space or energy for you to be weak, basically. This is what she told us in so many words, you know, and you just get by. And my father, on the other hand, you know, he taught my brother, and he told him, you know, this world is just a bunch of wolves. And either you're a predator or you're a prey. And you just have to look out for yourself. And so for us, for myself, I became very isolated, you know, growing up and, you know, getting older. I became, you know, kind of a loner. You became a lot more individualistic. And it's like, I didn't want to rely on anyone. And I think that's part of the reason why I got married so late. Is because I didn't want to rely on anyone because I was afraid of being let down. And I didn't want anyone to rely on me because I didn't want to let them down. But somehow in God's providence, He brought me and Julie together, and it worked out somehow. And I think, you know, another thing that I learned from my father, unfortunately, was also that it's okay to cut corners, and it's okay to step on other people if that's what you need to do. And that's caused some problems, you know, in my family as well. Now, I think for some of us in this room, I think I'm not the only one that have maybe had this experience. I think a lot of us in this room, either from our family of origin or from our culture, we've learned to be self-reliant. You know, we've been told by our parents, don't rely on anybody, you know, because it's just all about you. You can't rely on anyone. Take care of yourself. And so I think we're also taught, don't be vulnerable. Don't be too transparent, because if you are, people will hurt you. And so, unfortunately, I think in the church we have that problem of not being vulnerable, transparent, being real, and so we put up walls to try to make us look like we're tough and that we have everything together. But I think the problem with that is that is the one thing that keeps us from having this authentic community. You know, because authentic community comes from being vulnerable and just being transparent. You know, one of the ways a married couple becomes more intimately connected with one another is by simply being vulnerable. And one of the ways, you know, as you're married, is just seeing each other naked. That's the most vulnerable thing that you can do. And kind of looking at your partner and realizing, you know, wow, not every part of this person looks so great. I didn't realize I was marrying these parts of this person's body. You know, but it means that we're trusting, you know, this other person to handle, you know, looking at us, you know, in all our junk, in all of its glory. And, you know, this includes things like, you know, when you get married, you get used to doing things like, you know, farting in front of each other, like really loud, you know, after you get married. You get used to each other. You start catching each other doing things, like, you know, picking your nose, or you get used to seeing each other sitting on the toilet, you know, reading a newspaper. You know, very unattractive places to be, you know, unattractive images of one another. And yet we're trusting that somehow, you know, this other person is still going to accept us and want to stay married to us. And, you know, I can only speak from my experience that my wife has, you know, she's still with me, at least so far, you know, since we've been married. It's been, what, 3 years. I think that is the challenge, is being vulnerable, being transparent, to have an authentic community. And when we have authentic community, that's when we'll be able to experience joy that is complete, that Jesus is talking about here. Now, I think another reason why we have difficulty experiencing authentic community is because we're just simply too busy. I think a lot of us can agree on that. We talked about this before. In New York, everyone is busy. And I think one of the reasons we're so busy is we are also goal-oriented. You know, everyone's fixated on trying to achieve, you know, and trying to accumulate. And so we get very fixated, I think, on our careers. We get very fixated on our school and on our goals. And, you know, I think we're too busy trying to prove to the world and prove to ourselves that we are worthy and valuable. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with excellence. Like, God wants us to be, I think, He wants success to be in our lives, I think. But I think there's a problem when that becomes your number one priority, and that starts to take away from your relationships with other people. And so, what I think is at the root of this idol, busyness, and wanting to achieve, is a basic lack of understanding of how God views us as valuable and just worthy, just as we are. I think that's a concept that's very hard to grasp for us in our culture, in this particular context in New York or in the United States. And today, I just want to remind you guys this one simple lesson, which is Jesus views you the way that God views Jesus. Jesus views you the way that God views Jesus. That's why Jesus says, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. So what Jesus is saying is, do you see the relationship that I have with my Father? How much He cares about me, like how connected we are. I want you guys to have the same experience with me. And when He gets baptized by John, just to give you an idea of how God views Jesus. All four Gospels say that Jesus stands there getting baptized, and He hears a voice from heaven and says, "This is my Son with whom I am well pleased." And at this point, Jesus has done nothing to earn this affirmation from God. He didn't perform one sermon. He didn't perform one miracle. His ministry had not started. But yet, God is telling him, "This is my Son with whom I am well pleased," even though He didn't do anything. And so, I feel like today, God wants to tell you, "This is my Son with whom I am well pleased." And there's nothing that you can do to make me more pleased with you. There's nothing that you can do to make me get disappointed with you. Or, "This is my daughter with whom I am well pleased." There's nothing that you can do to earn my love. When Jesus died on the cross, when He gave His life, He didn't do it to earn the Father's love. Right? He didn't do it to earn our love. But He did do it, I think, to win our love. He died on the cross to win us over. When we think about, just leaders in general, people in power, usually when they want to control the people, they want to force their will on us. But Jesus, in this case, he would rather win our hearts. And He was able to do that on the cross. That was the whole point, is that He wanted to win our hearts rather than to dominate His will over us. Verse 13, Jesus says, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends." And so, and I want us to focus on that word friends. Jesus wants to have an intimate connection with us, the way that friends do. It's no longer a relationship of like master and servant. And Jesus makes that clear. It's no longer like close servants. But you guys are my friends. He wants to have that intimate connection that friends have with one another. I once heard a testimony about this man who came to Christ when he was in Korea. And it was when he was in the army. And at that time, he said that they were doing a drill. And one of the guys accidentally pulled out the pin of a grenade and it fell to the ground. And everyone just froze, except one guy. He said one guy jumped on top of the grenade. And, he was killed instantly. But he had saved, all the men around him. He literally gave his life for them. And he said after they were, kind of just gathering up the remains of his body, he said that the only thing that was intact in that pocket was a small Bible. And he began reading it every day. He took that with him because he wanted to understand. He's like, what kind of love could have motivated this guy to give his life for a bunch of soldiers that he barely knew, and a lot of soldiers who actually treated him very poorly. And he just read that because he wanted to know what kind of love motivated this guy to lay down his life for his fellow soldiers. And as a result of that, he came to know Christ because of that incident. I think unless we are willing to lay down our lives for one another, the way that Jesus did for us, we are not going to experience that joy that is complete, as Jesus says. If you want to experience, I think, true, complete joy, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you energy. It's going to cost you some sacrifice. It's going to ultimately cost you your autonomy because you're giving up your life for another person. Now Jesus, he gave up his life. He gave up everything that he had so that he could experience this joy that is complete. The Bible says that when he was on the cross, that for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning his shame. And so the reason why he stayed on that cross was he was motivated to experience this joy, the joy of seeing us intimately connected with him, so that we can experience, as he says, so that we can experience his joy, and that our joy would be complete. And so I think Jesus is now asking us to basically imitate his life, to imitate what he did on the cross for one another. So my question to you today is, what is keeping you from experiencing a joy that is complete? Do you experience a joy that's complete, or is your joy, does it feel inadequate or incomplete? Is it that you're not intimately connected with Jesus, or is it that you're not intimately connected with one another in the community? And I just want to leave you with this this thought, which is, once we make this a priority in our life, we will then begin to experience the fullness of God's promises and experience this joy that is complete. Once we make that a priority. So at this time, when we close our eyes in prayer and have the worship team come up. Lord, just thank you for this word. Thank you for just showing us, reminding us what it looks like to experience joy that is complete. And thank you for showing us an example of what it looks like to pursue this joy by wanting to connect with us so deeply and so intimately that you gave your life on the cross. And that now you called us to follow your example and give our lives for one another here in this community and for those who are outside of the church. I pray that you would speak to us personally today and help us to apply this to our life, to make you a priority, to make this community a priority, so we can experience this joy that is complete. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.